Hello there, and welcome to a breakdown of the Vulcan species of the Mirror Universe. A species who, on the surface, seem much like their Prime Universe counterparts, although instead of becoming happy allies of humanity, would be subjugated by it. Before we get started, if you like this or any other videos on this channel, please like, share and subscribe, and please head over to my second channel, Nerd.World Films. There's a link in the description below. Check out the content there, and please also like, share and subscribe to that channel as well. With that said, let's get started. On the surface, the Vulcans of the Mirror Universe seem very similar to those of the Prime Universe, but as you get to know them through what you see of them in the snippets of the Mirror Universe where you encounter them, there are some subtle differences. On the whole, things seem to present themselves the same way. Zephyrin Cochrane makes his warp flight historic, changing the fate of humanity. For whatever the reason his motivations were in either universe, doesn't really matter, he did it. The Vulcans detect it, not really knowing who the Terrans are or what they are. They very, quite frankly, mistakenly decide to land on Earth to make contact with this pioneer of warp technology. Now, these Vulcans behave and act much like the Vulcans do at the Prime Universe, except that they get killed. Later, a century later, when Vulcans are once again encountered and seen serving aboard Terran vessels, they are shown to be quite different, at least, well, subtly different from those of the Prime Universe. Much more emotional. T'Pol is seen to be almost spiteful towards Terrans, harbouring a resentment towards them, as is Soval, somewhat disillusioned by the treatment of his people at the hands of the Terrans. There is a subtle flavour of emotion just underneath the surface, a little more dominant, a little more present than what you see in the Prime Universe. Again, skipping forward another, well, almost century again, the Vulcans are encountered again. This time, Spock's father is encountered in the Mirror Universe, and he is shown to be very similar to his Prime Universe counterpart. Not emotional, very logical, very controlled. This is much like his Prime Universe counterpart, who in the Prime Universe, of course, is a Federation ambassador, but as part of the Mirror Universe, as we see as a common trend amongst the Vulcans, they are often part of some form of rebellion against the Terrans. Clearly, desiring their freedom is not a unique quality to the Prime Universe. The Terrans, of course, being an extremely oppressive regime, it's understandable that many would want freedom from it, at the risk of their own lives and the risks of their families would be very likely. Although we do know that Spock exists in both universes, so exactly how his relationship with Spock's mother came into existence to give birth to a half Terran, half Vulcan child in the Mirror Universe has not really been explained, and I somehow don't think it ever will be. Again, skipping forward yet another 100 years after the fall of the Terran Empire, the Mirror Universe version of Tuvok is seen again as part of the Terran Resistance against the Alliance. Clearly, Terrans and Vulcans had overcome their differences by this point to fight against a common enemy, although whether the long-term repercussions of Terran freedom would be beneficial to Vulcan, or neutral, or possibly be just replacing one conquering master with another who had previously done it and was possibly far worse. But nonetheless, this version of Tuvok is again much like his Prime Universe counterpart. Logical, not shown to really be displaying any emotion, as had 200 years earlier with Soval and T'Pol. Okay, without going too much into it, but just touch on it a little bit, because beyond the continuity of the episodes of Deep Space Nine, which show the Terran Resistance starting to turn the tables against the Alliance, we don't really see much of what happens to the Vulcans. We don't really know the fate, but there is a little bit more touched on in beta canon and in other sources, particularly if you look at the so-called Dark Universe, which shows the Terran Empire never fell and continued on into the 24th century, and people like Tuvok were actually officers in the Imperial Starfleet, serving aboard the ISS Titan around this same time period, and also previously serving aboard the ISS Excelsior. But forgetting the dark universe of the Terran Empire, it is shown that the Terrans re-establish themselves and reassert their authority over many of their former conquered worlds, basically reforming the Terran Empire, despite the fact that they had been looking like they might form some kind of new alliance. Although again, going further forward, they do form a sort of pseudo-federation eventually. Once their empire again becomes unsustainable, the Terrans do forge a new alliance of some description, but it's not quite the Federation, but it's not really an empire. But that, as I said, is all beta canon. I don't really want to go too much into it. Ultimately, culturally, the Vulcans of the Mirror Universe are very similar to their Prime Universe counterparts, as some races are. There are other species in the Mirror Universe that are ridiculously different to their Prime Universe counterparts, obviously the most notable being humans, who are very culturally different in both universes. Despite certain similarities in their histories, culturally the species are very different. The Ferengi are also quite different, a bit more altruistic and less selfish and greedy. But races like the Vulcans are pretty much exactly the same. The Klingons of the Mirror Universe are far less honourable and more interested in destruction and pure conquest than they are in conducting themselves in an honourable way. To them, the word honour is little more than a word. It doesn't hold the same meaning that it does to the Klingon Empire of the main universe. Cardassians, however, seem to be very similar, with the same level of untrustworthiness and ruthlessness that they display in the Prime Universe. As a result, it's a blurry line to really tell the difference, but the Vulcans do seem slightly more emotional, and of course have suffered hundreds of years of oppression of other powers, which has likely hardened them into a stronger species, but in terms of their culture, they do seem fairly similar, again, if a little more emotional. Okay, well, thank you for watching that video on the Vulcans and their culture of the Mirror Universe. Not really much to go on, I know. I think I've drawn that out a little more than it should have been. But thank you for watching again. If you enjoyed this and you made it all the way to the end, thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. But please, like, share, subscribe, and please head over to my second channel, Nerd.World Films, where you'll find several more videos there, and I've got lots more planned for that channel. At the minute, there's just a few things you didn't know videos, but I've got a lot more planned for that, like full movie breakdowns. So please head over there, watch those, like, share, and subscribe over there as well. I could really use the help growing that channel. And thank you, and bye-bye.